People of Reddit, what stupid rule at your work school backfired beautifully? I was working as a medical assistant at a private practice medical clinic. Our clinic manager wouldn't allow the new receptionist to drive to the bank to deposit cash. Made her walk carrying the money bag so that she couldn't drive away with the money. Bizarre, I know. That went on for a few weeks. Then the receptionist was mugged and over $1,000 in cash was stolen. She was allowed to drive after that. My old workplace had a control freak bean counter. At one point she decided that any purchase of equipment must come with documentation showing that we had search around the internet and prove you got the best deal. Honestly, it was unenforceable. So our supervisor just told us to ignore it and that he'll deal with the backlash. So one day, I had to buy some tools for the workshop. And I happened to come across a bunch of coolers on sale. It just happened that we needed coolers to transport stuff. So I bought one. I brought it back. We measured it and found it was the perfect size for what we had planned. Turns out that time the bean counter was watching us. She came strolling in my supervisor's office with a printout from Amazon and the boss in tow, saying that she had found a similar cooler for cheaper. My supervisor took a look at the printout. So you found a cooler that's $2 cheaper? Yes. How much time did you spend looking this up? Just 1 hour of work. And you think Rum should have spent 1 hour of his workday to shop for coolers? Yes. You do realize we pay Rum $17 an hour? We need 3 coolers. Right now he grabbed those cooler while out on a supply run. And you'd rather have him spend 1 hour of his day at $17 an hour to save $6. And while we're at it, supervisor pulls out a broken vice grip from under his desk. This is the cheapo brand vice grip you approved. Now, this is fine for your regular at-home needs, but we're a workshop and need some quality stuff. We've been using a good stuff brand vice for 3 years. Cheapo lasted 6 months. Do the math. My boss started putting all staff required to start 15 minutes earlier than indicated on the roster. I started keeping track of my unpaid overtime and stung her for 3 paid days off. That's not required anymore. I worked for a company that did that. 1 lawsuit later, they don't do it anymore and owed a lot of us back pay. Not mine, but an old roommate of mine was a senior developer for a small company. It was an open secret that one of the other senior devs, a guy who had been there since the beginning, would sometimes spend time looking at plastic surgery photos before after shots, photos of active procedures, etc. He did it enough that people would poke fun at him about it, but he didn't seem embarrassed about it, and it wasn't harming anyone. Well, one day a project manager said something to the CEO about this guy's ongoing plastic surgery obsession, and the CEO flipped. He said that, going forward, no one was allowed to use their work computers to access external websites at all. Anyone who's ever been a developer knows that half the job is googling stuff. So this policy pretty much halted productivity in its tracks. It only lasted a day before the CEO retracted the rule, but let everyone know that their browser history would be monitored going forward. After that, no one really changed their behavior. They just started remotely accessing their home computers to browse instead. Yes, I am going to outsmart computer programmers about how to use their time on the computers more effectively. I am very smart. Back in the early zeros, my high school implemented a policy that you had to wear your ID tag at all times. If you didn't have it on, you were sent home. So many students lost their ID tag to go grab food or skip a class. We were the only graduating class to wear them all 4 years. The policy ended soon after. I worked on this company that had mandatory 1-hour lunch breaks. Since we ate on the premises, our lunch break was often 15 minutes or so. We tried negotiating having shorter lunch breaks so we could leave earlier and beat traffic. Next day an email was sent from the OWN stating the fixed work and break hours for the whole team, and they were to be followed, no exceptions. Cool. Next week, a big client called about halfway through our lunch, and nobody moved. It rang and rang until said owner took the call, talked to them, and immediately came to scold us. Sorry, boss, as per your rules, we are off until 1 PM. No exceptions. Couple of weeks later, we did some work on site for the same client. They were, to be honest, one of the coolest clients I ever had in my life. They took us out to lunch, and while talking we ended up relaying the owner's rule. They had a big chuckle over it, and while the project lasted, they made a point to always call while we were at lunch break just to annoy owner. I worked at Starbucks for like 5+ years before and during undergrad, and at one point our district manager thought it was a good idea to implement a just say yes policy, where we literally weren't allowed to tell the customer no. Lasted for about 3 months, and in that 3 months our unaccounted product and waste went up over 300% because when the POS didn't have a way to punch in a customer request we had to just do it anyways. We also got complaints from stores in surrounding districts because they had angry customers who were requesting things that were against local food service code, and told them that we did it for them at our store. I knew exactly how that policy was going to play out, and I just laughed every time management was freaking out about the problems it was causing. Give me all the money in the cash register and make me a free iced coffee. Yes, we shall not deny a customer even the most ridiculous request. I am amazed that someone came up with that policy and thought it was a good idea. Not a stupid rule, but I think this should apply. I'm in aviation maintenance and wanted to leave the current company that I worked for 12 years with. During my interview at the new company, I was asked why I was thinking of leaving my current job, being that it was a good and reputable company. I said new management is all about efficiency and not the one thing aviation maintenance is all about: safety. Interviewer liked my interview and assured their company doesn't cut any corners in safety vs cost. I get the job. Fast forward 6 months or so, I'm the new guy, so I get the short end and have to work Christmas Eve. Should be a short day. Boss's plane is coming in from Cabo to drop off chartered passengers, fill up on fuel and take him and family to their vacation home in Aspen. Plane arrives, and as I'm doing my post-flight walk around, I see a big problem that forces me to ground the plane. Boss is clearly not happy, attempts to force me to make an unapproved repair. I deny to do so and I'm sent home. Sweet. I didn't quit. It's documented and I get to go home earlier than planned on a holiday. Someone else gets called in to do the Mickey Mouse of a repair. Everyone's happy. Plane taxis out with owner and family. Full on fuel and tries to take off. Whoops. Crappy repair failed. Huge component breaks off and goes into the inlet of the jet engine. Grenades that engine. Plane's brakes overheat trying to stop the heavy A-plane with just one engine. Some fuselage is damaged from the engine that gave out and the plane finally comes to a stop. FAA comes in. Sweet. Who made this repair? Who accepted to take this flight? What company operates this way? So, dummy tech that tried to make the repair gets his license revoked. The boss owns the charter company, so he's fined a huge amount and is put on a probation with continuous FAA audits, and, best of all, the insurance rejected his claim to the engine because it was negligence. This cost him millions, and they couldn't fire me. I got to tell the story over and over and over with a big smile on my face. This story needs to be higher up. This is like the textbook definition of refusing and safe for an ethical work, and the reason why you should. My spouse's workplace realized they didn't have a policy about sending sexual images or jokes as part of their email acceptable use policy, so they added it, except they made it a firing offense to send or receive sexual content. I think the intent was to stop people from subscribing to such content. They also said that your access would be immediately revoked until a determination was made. So someone got fired for something else and decided to send their whole management chain a graphically sexual image, then report it using the anonymous tip line. It got the report, concluded they did indeed receive sexual content, and it has required suspended all the involved email accounts, including the SVPs. The policy has since been reworded. There's burning bridges and then there's drying up the lake just to fill it with gasoline. Damn. I'd assume that if you get fired, they're not exactly going to give you a glowing recommendation. The bottom floor of my secondary school was a square that had corridor all the way around. After some incident where a kid got knocked over, they implemented a one-way system. Unfortunately, they were very strict on enforcing it. If you accidentally walked past your class, you couldn't just turn around. They seemed very proud of their new rule, until everyone started showing up late for class because they had to do extra laps of the bottom floor. That's ridiculous. My daughter is experiencing this with COVID one-way rules. They're only actually in school once or twice a week between snow and hybrid, so none of them know where the hell they're going. And if they miss, they have to go around again. Couldn't buy drinks at lunch with cash money, had to buy some voucher. They were just cheaply made laminated pieces of paper. This was 2001. I was 13 and scanned the vouchers and printed them out on paper that kinda matched the color of the vouchers, and laminated them myself. They were horrible made and not even the right color on the backside, also crudely cut out. I made about 100 of them, have passed them out after I tried paying with them for myself and encountered no problems. Made some new friends and upped production. Took them about 3 weeks to find out, but by then the fakes ones had intermingled with the real ones and had already been resold to students via the student office. About half of the vouchers sold were fakes. Drinks were cash only from then on. They had no choice to accept the fakes one for a little while longer though, as they had sold and charged for some of them. Did they ever find out it was you by some error? Lol. Did this with the old Seattle bus passes before they switched to the swipeable kind. The year-long passes could cost as much as $300 or, yeah no, $1 at the local Kinkers to print off an entire page of them. I had a friend who just kept all of hers. Eventually they'd reuse the letter and color and she'd just use an old one. A place I used to work had a rule that executive level staff needed to be contactable when on leave, so they had a section on the leave form for the address of where you'd be staying and a contact number. Some knuckle shuffler in HR decided it applied to all staff and the shenanigans began. People would put down the address and phone number of sex shops, sports grounds, medical clinics. I gave the latitude and longitude of the place I was going camping and the UHF frequency channel my radio would be tuned to. I once had a manager tell us we couldn't hang out with each other outside of work unless we invited everyone. No. So that's what happened to the kid who never got invited to parties. My company used to be a small startup. In my first year I was the project manager and architect for a global system rollout. I put in my vacation days for Burning Man 6 months out, in February, and my PTO was approved. Then a few months later, June, my boss, who had been head of the IT department, got a new boss, new head of it. With a month to go until Burning Man, the new head of it told me that my project rollout was too important for me to be uncontactable at all and that I would need to take a satellite phone to Burning Man or my vacation would be cancelled. We were still 3 months from go live, but he decided that we were at a critical moment that I had to be available for. However, neither my boss or the new head of it wanted to carry out the daily $18 minute satellite phone calls with me, probably because they knew it was violating some labor law. So they got one of the guys in the London office to call me in the Black Rock Desert each day. I said I wouldn't take the calls before 1 PM, which was 9 PM for our man in London. Every day he called he had had a few beers, and didn't give a sh about project updates. He just wanted to know what parties I'd been to and what art I'd seen. I was asked to do that once. Fire Road H, Indian Township, ME. Good effing luck finding me. Didn't occur to me to give what frequency my VHF radio would have been on. In Las Vegas, the fire departments had a policy that if someone called out and you covered their shift, you get paid overtime. Eventually every firefighter at every department was trading shifts so that they were always making overtime. Went on unnoticed for over a year. It was a huge scandal and the ones in charge who let it go on and effectively cost the city millions had the book thrown at them hard. Something similar. We had 2 tea ladies that both worked 2.5 days each. They figured out that if they each worked 1 week on 1 week off they'd get paid more with the overtime. A long while back, but my school banned the color pink because a bunch of students were wearing it one October and they thought it was a gang thing. It was for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. The rule didn't go well for them. My principal banned pink silicone bracelets. They were being sold in town to raise money for breast cancer. 6 months later she had to have chemo to treat her breast cancer. It's not really funny, but it is kind of ironic. To make moving between classes more efficient, they had designated up and down stairways, but they didn't take into account that the stairs were located at the ends of the very long corridors, which meant it was impossible to get to your next class on time. Because of this, no one bothered trying to get to class on time and just blamed the stairway rule. When I was a teacher, one of my classes had this issue since the class they were coming from was on the other end of the building and downstairs. Considering that I always saw them rushing to at least try to get to class on time, I never enforced the rule against tardiness for that class, and luckily they were a great group and none of them ever took advantage of it. Should have taken their cues from Wayside School. Everybody goes up on the left and down on the right, or similarly, have two elevators. One that only goes up and one that only goes down. My HS had a smoking in the bathroom problem, and to solve it, rather than having a teacher outside the restrooms during hall time, they locked all the bathrooms except one. This made it so you had to wait in a stupid long line with 1,200 other students trying to use 3 stalls for each gender in the 10 minutes between classes. During class time they had the assistant principal sit outside the one open bathroom and they would check your ID and sign you in and out, and only one student in at a time. Major health code violation. Kids would be holding it all day. Girls on their cycle needed the restroom and would often have to get a pass from class to go use the restroom. BC the lines were too long during breaks. Smokers still smoked in the gym locker-rooms during changing time. This rule didn't solve anything but made it very unhygienic and rather annoying to just use the restroom. In chemistry class we had plastic bottles of distilled water which could be squeezed to produce a small jet of water. We used to spray one another's crotches to make it look like you peed yourself. To counter this, our teacher introduced a punishment to anyone caught spraying or having been sprayed. Hence, if you could spray someone and get away with it, they would have wet trousers and have to write excerpts from a Martin Luther King speech. Needless to say, the punishment for being sprayed was quickly abolished. Every shift, there's a quota we need to fulfill, and then, even if you do fulfill it, you have to keep working until your 8 hours are up. Cue everyone speeding for 4 hours, having a 3-hour lunch coffee break, then slowly moving their way for an hour. No rule about us taking necessary breaks if we're still capable of reaching the quota. Now we're allowed to stop once we're done. Geez, a 3-hour lunch break is one of the most amazing things I've heard. It gets really effing boring. For about 3 months in my last job, I would have about 40 minutes work to do per 7.5-hour shift. There's only so much time you can kill in an office building. Late 80s high school rule was no shorts. Classmate came for an exam with basketball shorts on that were below her knees. Teacher made her go home to change. She came back in a micro mini skirt and wrote her exam. My high school principal was known for sending girls home to change if their bra straps were showing. In my sophomore year he tried to send one of my classmates home, but she was like, "Nah, I've got a change of clothes. No need to send me home." So she went to the bathroom, took her bra off, and made a show of putting it in her locker. The principal was pissed, but couldn't do anything about it since she technically was following the dress code. It became a thing, like hundreds of high school girls removing their bra at school or just showing up braless as a big F you to the principal. As a woman, that rule made me feel incredibly self-conscious about being a girl. Like bra straps. Oh no, good on the students for balking at it. Not sure if this applies, but I worked at a restaurant that started doing Thursday night trivia in hopes of more traffic. The prize for the winner was their ticket would get comped. One guy asked to have everyone in the restaurant's food put on his ticket, and then won. They stopped doing trivia night. Rather stupid to stop it. Just add a $1 limit. People who were caught wandering the halls or skipping classes were sent straight home. Similarly, when I was in high school, I once got suspended for ditching school too many days in a row. You don't want to be here? Fine. We don't want you either. But honestly, what else can they do? The general manager did this when I worked at Best Buy. If you were late, he'd send you home, even if it was only by 5 minutes. Nearly every department was understaffed on any given day because of it. Sometimes the schedules would be changed without the employee's knowledge. The GM would call the employee asking where they were, telling them to get to the store ASAP. When they got there he'd reprimand them in front of customers and send them home only seconds after walking into the store. 1 or 2 people quit on the spot when that happened to them. I specifically remember one employee taking off his name tag and throwing it in the GM's face. That was special. I had a GM like that at Staples. He didn't last long. Nice. We had that rule except for if you had a hall pass. My art teacher got tired of the BS and wrote me and some others non-expiring hall passes. I used it for 2 years. You can just go straight home, young man, and we won't call your parents to explain. You'll have to do that yourself, and we won't be sending your homework from your missed classes. You'll just be excused from it and have to live without the extra education. How do you like that? Oh, you have a test in 9th period? Well, I guess you'll have to take it tomorrow in an empty room all by yourself with nobody to keep you company. Now, if you could do me a favor and on your way out, dispose of all this confiscated alcohol, cigarettes, pornography, and marijuana. The janitor is off today. Back in 2011, a company I worked for had the bright idea to block all social networks because, you know, employees should work instead of slacking off on Facebook. I could write volumes of books on the toxic culture in that place, but the owner-president, who lived in a different country and visited about once every few months, was universally feared by everyone, and a few days before his arrival the whole building went into panic mode. So a few weeks after the social network ban, His Royal Highness shows up, and 5 minutes later half of a department is scrambling to his office. Apparently there was an issue with the Wi-Fi, or at least that's what he figured since he couldn't log on to Facebook. It was fixed in seconds. A few years and 3 promotions later, I make a joke about it with him. Instead of a laugh, I get a confused look. Turns out he still thinks it was some internet problem, since whoever decided to ban social networks didn't have the balls to tell him about it after the incident. Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn were all blocked by it at my company a few months ago after some other massive issues. Now it makes it really hard for my department, marketing, to do anything. My boss has to fire up the hotspot on his phone and do things with his laptop if we want anything posted to social media. In our company we have a exceptions filter for our marketing people to let them access this stuff. Surprised you guys don't have this. At my old school you could get suspended for most minor infractions. This included smoking. However, if you were a witness to other people smoking, then you would get suspended along with them. So this ended up with everyone constantly working together to hide the smokers at all cost, otherwise just about everyone would be suspended. Your school just wanted to teach everyone how to be better liars while also not having to deal with the smokers. This policy of punishing those who knew as well as those who committed the offense persisted. Another funny example of it backfiring was when a group of learners carried a teacher's car in between the rugby poles and barricaded it with hockey nets on either side chained together while about half the grade watched. Afterwards everyone just turned around and walked away, knowing full well if anyone said anything then they would all get suspended for bots stopping them. As far as I know, no one was punished for it. I am the one who lives closest to work. So if the building alarm goes off overnight, I'm first on the list to get the call from the alarm company. It used to be that if we had good reason to believe the alarm was not an actual break-in, we could tell them not to summon the police and ignore the alarm. I can access the building cameras from home. The most common alarm was the cleaning crew, who were always messing up the disarming. Then a sister site ignored an alarm that turned out to be an actual break-in. And the facilities director decided that no matter what, if there was an alarm, we should have the alarm company summon the police, then go to the building, get the police all clear, and reset the alarm. This was a pain in the A but rare enough, and I lived literally 2 minutes away. Then we contracted for the alarm company to come in and replace all of our panels and sensors. It was a nightmare process that ultimately ended up taking months, and the whole time there were phantom alarms, sometimes multiple times a night. Each time I had to go out in the middle of the night, I'd prepare the required report, send it to the facilities director, and request to go back to the old process. Each time he said no, we couldn't afford to miss a potential real break-in. After about 3 weeks of this nonsense, I was due for some time off. I was going out of town, and the protocol for that was for me to ignore calls from the alarm company, so they moved to the next person on the list, which happened to be the facilities director. In the 5 days I was off, I must have ignored at least 4 overnight calls that all would have gone to him next. Then suddenly, nothing. When I got back I was informed that for the duration of the alarm update, we just weren't going to arm the building at all. So much for can't afford to risk a break-in. Every manager seems to love just call somebody in as their solution to every problem until they are the person who actually has to wake their ray up in the middle of the night and go in. I had a director level guy one time say everything is the easiest thing in the world for the guy that doesn't have to do it, when someone in a meeting was trying to talk about how trivial some non-trivial work was. It really stuck with me.